So welcome to the Advantech Virtual Update. I'm your host, Richard Ronce, and joining me is our special guest, the CEO of 40, Bela Farbas. Bela, thanks for your time joining us today. How are you doing today?
First of all, you're welcome. I'm good. It's the end of the long weekend back at work. I wish I wasn't, but you know, that's a normal thing. All is well. Yeah.
I think that, you know, in the general scheme of things, you know, there's a lot of people with that same you know, thought process sort of going on. Look, aside from the work, yeah, what's been keeping you occupied recently?
Well, in my copious spare time, I've taken up machine learning, believe it or not, on top of the other hobbies and the kids.
That's definitely, you know, the type of thing to just do in spare time.
Of course, yeah.
You know, there's simpler things that we can look at.
Well, look, I've always been fairly mathematically minded. It was one of my strong points in you know, education, and so I thought it's getting a lot more currency and traction in my line of work, and I thought I should get my head around it to at least a journeyman level, which is good fun.
Yeah. It's, I mean, when you talk about like machine learning and things along those lines, it's, I have to admit, just like you, I've spent a few minutes dabbling in it and, you know, getting involved and, you know, just trying to understand some of the, like, just the high level concepts. And, you know, unlike you, I mean, when, you know, during, you know, my education, I realized that I probably really wasn't all that good mathematically. Yeah, at least until I sort of, you know, discovered that there was a, you know, once you have that reason for learning, things fall in place.
Yeah.
But I just remember that, you know, when first looking at things like, you know, neural nets and like relationships and all that sort of stuff, I just remember sort of seeing how they use matrices to govern all those relationships. And I just had this flashback back to school when I remember the math teacher going, just thinking, this stuff's never gonna, you know, be ever useful. And, you know, it turns out that when you actually see it and how it works and how it links hundreds and hundreds of nodes, not to mention other things in computer science, blah, 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 subjects which I'm not qualified to talk about. It's really, really important. And yeah, for all the people listening out there, especially if you're still doing school, you know, get involved, pay attention. That's the only bit of unsolicited advice that I'll give. So well, yeah,
for what it's worth, I had the same experience. I hated statistics. I was good at all of the other maths. It was my area of maths that I despised. But as you say, when you start to see a need for it, when you start to see a use for it, it fundamentally changes your approach to studying that thing.
Yeah, and when it does come to statistics, I definitely know that there's a few lines from The Simpsons which we could probably do a whole bunch of copyright infringement about. Namely to do with 40%. But no, I mean, it's especially with some of the things that, you know, we were talking about previously. Yeah, moving on. This is the type of stuff that, you know, we could talk about ad nauseum about. Yeah, one of the things that you did mention was that, and it really ties in nicely with machine learning, is that we look at, you mentioned the tagline of future-proofing operations through intelligent IoT, and, you know, having that as a tagline for your business. Tell us about the story that, you know, came about behind that.
Yeah, sure. So look, as you say, machine learning is actually a really, really core part of that for us, specifically the intelligent IoT bit. So we live in operations land. So every customer that we've got, every industry that we've been in, we generally don't service head office, although they tend to be an end consumer of the data that we produce and our systems produce. But the actual recipient, the actual beneficiary of all of our technology is always operations, whether it's workforce management, asset tracking, you know, remote monitoring, telemetry, control solutions. It's always for the operations guys. Industry 4.0 is very current. I think it has been for a while, but there's this interesting shift that's taking place at the moment, which I personally call intelligent IoT, where we're starting to move away from kind of spray and pray with 10,000 sensors that are smashing a gigantic volume of data back every 10 seconds into a lake, which people then scratch their heads about what to do with, right? As in, how do we actually derive valuable operational insights and outcomes from that data? We're moving away from that into much more intelligent systems where we say, okay, so you're getting all this data, you've got 100 temperature sensors, they're all reporting something. Are they actually saying the same thing? Are they all the same manufacturer? Are they calibrated to the same level? Are they scaled in the same way? And so on. So that's the intelligent part of the tagline that you mentioned. More broadly for us, one of the things that we spend a fair bit of time on is actually building self-learning and predictive models into the solutions. So not only do you get the actual data, the historical trending and analysis that you can do, but we're constantly working on providing more and more accurate targeted insights about what's likely to happen as a result of all that chain of data that's been coming through. So I think for us, that's what I mean by intelligent IoT. So it's a little bit sharper, it's a little bit more targeted to the outcome, it's a bit smarter than just data.
And I think you've really defined that in a very, very specific and precise way. There's a lot of, I think we all see it all the time that everyone talks about things being smart, but data is data. It doesn't lie, it doesn't have a bias. And when we talk about those predictive modeling, systems that you've actually got, the way that it can sort of lead you and provide that insight, I think that's where things are. And what you're doing there seems to be really on the front line of what industry has actually been after, because there has been a little bit of that, as you said, let's collect a whole bunch of data, stick it in a pool, and wonder what we do with it.
Yeah, so magically insights will materialize, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to everything that it is that you guys get involved with on the operational sides, when it comes to the predictive modeling, what are the things that you've actually sort of been seeing out there with your customers, and what's going on for the people that you actually work for?
That's a really, really good question, because it's actually shifted. It shifted quite a bit recently. So there's two main trends that I'll say. One is, and they both tie into the concept of intelligent IoT. One of them is that customers are expecting a lot more context-aware outcomes from their IoT implementations. What I mean by context-aware is not so much, hey, here's my floor plan and I've got dots to represent sensors and machinery. That's kind of generation one. Context aware in terms of process context, business context. So if you have a sensor that's peaking above a threshold, how can you tell if that sensor is currently being calibrated and therefore should be peaking above a threshold and therefore not triggering a critical alarm in your automation control system? How can you tell that as opposed to normal operations? Well, it's the context, because we happen to know that there's somebody on site right now calibrating sensors. Therefore, the system goes, oh, I'm in that mode. Don't worry about it. It's just John doing his thing to make sure things are accurate. Right? So there's that need to make the alerting, alarming, the workflow, I guess, that gets generated whenever an IoT sensor triggers something, to make that workflow a lot smarter, a lot more contextual. The second big thing is specifically in the need of just predicting actions and predicting outcomes that are going to occur, not just based on the historical data that we're seeing in that context that I'm talking about, but also to some amount being able to do what if analysis on it. So, so they're basically saying, okay, I can see that under these normal operating circumstances, the following things are likely to happen. And that's what your typical machine learning does. What happens if I tweak things? What happens if we change this? What happens if I change that? Where do we see things moving? So that's an area of great interest for customers at the moment.
Right. That's I mean, having that dynamic range, that's something that it's a huge thing. Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like being able to sort of change goals, or being able to change operating windows like on the fly. Yeah, when it comes to real world and especially live processes. Look, yeah, the next thing that I'd probably be looking into here is with a lot of the expectations. Yeah, let's rephrase that. A lot of the people out there, especially what we see, is that there is a lot of expectations for things to be able to work, just straight away out of the box. And one thing that we've sort of touched on over time is that you seem to do a lot of bespoke work, which is something that not everyone out there seems to really want because of the time and the expense that goes into it. So how does that level of customization that you guys provide really work with your customers?
Well, that's an interesting one. So the way that works for us is we basically break everything we do into modules, right? Logically, there's a control component, there's an interface component, there's a data pump, there's a yada 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 yada. And then what we do is we go, okay, well, every customer has a need for a data store. Every customer has a need to plug into certain things to get data into that data store. There's a certain amount of transformation that takes place, scaling, standardization, cleansing, things like that. And then that generally is fairly standard. And the nice thing about where we operate in operations land, as I called it, is typically in industrial applications, there's 5 or 6 different ways to talk to things. You've got a couple of serial buses, you've got Ethernet IP, you've got potentially maybe some CSV files, file transfers, that kind of thing. Once we've got those up and running, then it's literally just plug and play to say, okay, we need to talk to your system. It's Profibus. Okay, no worries. We'll use our adapter, get that data in. So pretty much up to the point where we've got the data, it's fairly standard for us. Where it gets more complex and the customizations you speak about is kind of the usage of it. And so the way we've done that is we've basically just got software modules that meet specific needs of what we do with that data, workforce management, asset management, things like that. And that's where there's customization that might occur for a customer.
So in terms of everything that you've actually just sort of covered there, you've really broken down. You've really distilled those years and years of industry experience down to repeatable, readily accessible, blocks that you can sort of drop in place for the customer in order to move quickly.
That's exactly right. And then when you take that context and marry it with something which is a deep personal belief of mine that is at odds with that expectation that you're talking about, is that at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of irreducible complexity in industry.
Yeah,
right? You're not going to get around the fact that recycling plant A is going to be subtly different to recycling plant B, even if they're recycling exactly the same thing. And so we have a readiness and a willingness to understand that complexity. We accept it, and then we deploy the right tools, make changes where we have to for the right customer, for the right opportunity, because ultimately it's all about driving value for the people who are paying the bills, right? So if their world is complex, we'll make it less complex for them.
Yeah, and look, that's ultimately what it all comes down to, and I think that's one of the things that we do see, across industry, and that's not just one of the things that we see from our perspective. It's things are constantly getting more complicated, all in the name of being intelligent. It's not just a case of, exactly as you said, when it comes to context, it's not just about dropping a sensor out there and being above or below a certain value and thinking, okay, it's above this, it's below that, that is now wrong, it's complex, we need to act on it. There has to be that context. Everything is multidimensional. So, everything that you're saying, just, it really does, how do I say it? It really does transfer that sort of picture about what industry is doing and how you guys are adapting to that.
Yeah, and just on that topic, to the multidimensional aspect, right? So people go, who are your customers? And my answer to that is always ops. A customer is always ops. And then you think about that. You go, well, what is ops? What does your typical site manager, plant manager, regional state manager have? Well, they've got physical operating requirements. They've got regulatory operating requirements. They've got P&L responsibilities. It's a hideously complex web of things that they have to navigate. So where I see real value, and I think what we've done quite well, is we don't just play the technology card. We try and plug those, or rather soothe those pain points that they have from that complexity.
And that's, you know, I mean, we've had conversations previously about, you know, except for the fact that, you know, for people sort of listening to this, you know, we're actually recording this conversation. I mean, we've talked about the human behavior really being the end goal, of industry, and you know, that's something that you're really communicating very, very clearly in terms of how you work with operations, how you work with your customers to actually sort of benefit that side of things. That being said, we've been looking at really, really complex matters right now. So I think the next question I'm going to sort of throw at you here is a little bit, maybe a little bit oversimplified. And that is, okay, so what challenges has 4.0 actually overcome to establish itself, other than everything that you've already described?
Okay, so parking the technical challenges, which is what we've spoken about. Look, it's fairly, I think we're fairly vanilla on this one in terms of we're a small business, right? So we're bigger now, but we certainly started micro. And small business, I want big customers. Sure. So how are you going to service those customers? Right? How are we going to get there? So that was a very big one at the beginning for us, until we got a few runs on the board, and now there's that chain of credibility and you know, case studies and all of that kind of stuff that you need. The other one is very typical and is very topical also at the moment, is like industry wide, is funding. Right? So a typical thing that you see is it's unusual to have companies these days in technology bootstrap. It's very, very common to go have an idea, you build a business case, you seek funding enough to build out an MVP, and then you kind of do repeated funding cycles. We haven't gone that path. And that was a big series of challenges for us in the early days.
I can only imagine you know, the difficulties in terms of opening doors and getting in there.
It was good fun.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Look, I think it's probably time that we actually move on to some, you know, things that maybe, perhaps, definitely, probably not work related. Okay, so this is where I'm going to put you on the spot here. What was the last movie that you actually went to go see?
Oh God, I think it was Deadpool 2.
Good movie.
Long time ago.
Good flick. Once again, look, probably not the type of thing where we can actually sort of drop any quotes here for
no, sorry.
A lot of reasons. I have to confess, you know, we actually just went out on the weekend to go see Shang-Chi.
Is it good?
Movie. Yeah,
Oh,
really,
great.
really good. Look, I've got to confess, yeah, as a self-confessed Marvel nut, I basically don't even wait for the trailers. It's like, yeah, there's a release date. I'm committed. They've got 20 movies of track record. You go. That being said, what was the last meal that you made? I mean, I've gotten a little bit addicted to Uber Eats, so they don't really qualify.
Well, yesterday, because it was Melbourne Cup weekend, I actually had time to take the time to do this. I did chicken crepes with a cream and shallot sauce, and then I made some apple pie dessert, like just standard apple pie with ice cream.
I'm going to say it now, for anyone who does want the recipe for that, make sure you hit up Bela in the based off his LinkedIn in the comments below.
Happy to share.
Bela, it's been amazing talking with you and learning more about what 4.0 do directly from the source. That being said, we probably need to wrap up, but by
Sure.
all means, look, stay on the line. And when we actually sort of get off when we actually stop the recording, hopefully we'll be able to sort of carry on with a few more bits and pieces.
Yeah, thanks,
That being
Rich.
said,
Appreciate the opportunity.
you're welcome, and can't wait to actually have you back on in future. For the rest of us, look, there is a few bits and pieces from Advantech that we're going to cover. Now, it's time for our feature product, and that there, with such an emphasis on IoT, the device that we're highlighting this time around is actually the ICR3232 and subsequently the BB-SR308. Now, they're our cellular gateways right now. And just to give you a few high-level features about them, the gateways themselves being cellular gateways, they run on 9 to 36 volt power. They've got all of your connectivity such as GPS, cellular, and also Wi-Fi system. With embedded operating systems, they're designed for a fast boot and capable of your wide operating temperatures between -40 and 75 degrees. Now, they've also got all of your standard ports that you're going to be looking at, such as 2 Ethernet, RS232, 485, plus as well as having connectivity such as GPS, Baidu, etc. Most important thing probably for the people out there when it comes to planning anything in the cellular space is going to be the bands that you'll be able to support. So you're going to be looking at bands 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 28, and also band 40. So the big thing with this is that you're also going to be able to use things such as your open development platforms. That means coding on them. You can actually develop some edge intelligence on them using Python, C++, and Node-RED. That being said, unfortunately, the ICR3232 series, as we've just gotten some information probably in the last few days, is subject to a lengthy delay at the present time. And at the moment, that has a lead time of around about 12 months out to October next year. And that's where our information right now is that there is a power regulator, so a component within the unit that is supplied by Texas Instruments that has a lead time of 80 weeks, or about 18 months in real world time. So just for everyone out there, the product management teams are looking for potential alternative options to improve supplies. But with the state of the supply chains, there is nothing solid right now. That being said, the BB-SR308, which is the sister product to it, does not use that same regulator and is currently far more available, albeit there's around about 36 different models of it. So make sure that you have a look at the data sheet in the link below, and we'll be able to get in contact with the sales team and be able to figure out which one works for you. So even though we've got some lead times out there, lead time issues, there's also a registration code that I'm going to make available to listeners, and that is the registration code of Gateway 180. Now, that's where you can register your project with us within the next month and have 12 months to place your orders with us for a 10% discount on Advantech product. There are terms and conditions, so make sure to check those below. We've also got some upcoming events. Now, there's 3 special presentations that are actually going to be available on demand. The first one, and most recently, it actually just took place today, which is the machine vision solution for the food and beverage industry. And that was presented by Alan Tsai, who is our Advantech Channel Sales Manager, Tony Boyer, who's the Director of Automated System and Controls, Don McComb, who's the Automation Engineer, and Ashwan Wirasena, who's also the Automation Engineer, where they cover the Jalna case study highlight, where they look at machine vision for packaging in the food and beverage industry. The next presentation that just took place last week was Smart City Energy. Now, this happened on the 28th, where the presentation was delivered by Deepak Kanogia, the Key Account Manager at Advantech, Herman Burbano, the Energy Solutions Manager at Indra, and Priya Galketiya, Project Manager of the Net Zero Initiative at Monash University, and other speakers. So that there, for anyone who's actually interested in the power and energy, or especially in smart grids, this presentation actually had a lot of really sort of deep knowledge, very sort of low level tech in terms of how they look at machine learning and adaptation for smart grids there. The third one was also the remote monitoring of conveyor belts for mining. Once again, leading to a lot of things when it comes to insights and machine learning about how to do preventative maintenance. So that was presented by Steve Soon, Key Account Manager at Advantech, and Paul Rowan, the Business Development Manager at Future Fibre Technologies. So there they had a look at the breakdown trends of critical assets, specifically conveyor belts. I had no idea that some conveyor belts are as long as 20 kilometers. The detection methods available and how to prevent workflow interruptions to maximize efficiency, and the local case study with their cloud monitoring platform and remote monitoring. So they're the presentations. There'll be links in the description below. So when this gets posted up, you'll be able to see those presentations on demand. So the second last thing that we've got here is an answer for industry. And this one here is about how often do I need to upgrade? Now, this is one of those sort of, this has a very sort of simple, but also, yeah, it's a little bit more of a complex answer. How often you need to upgrade your equipment out there in industry is not necessarily always about the hardware. And we see this time and time again, particularly now in 2021, where hardware sometimes just lasts for almost 5 to 7 years, probably longer than it would probably be expected to do so. However, your upgrade times are going to be more to do with your software. So staying up to date, particularly with operating systems and operating software, is going to probably be your determining factor. So that means if you're still out there running on DOS, Windows 98 or 95, and if you're listening, don't laugh, it happens. We do get these requests, and that's why I'm bringing it up. We also have people who are still using Windows XP. Now, although XP is an operating system that still functions out there, if you've got a Windows XP based system out there, let's say your operational platforms are running on XP, we can't get that hardware anymore because the operating system only runs on 3rd generation or earlier Intel based systems. Windows 7, although the support for it has closed off, we can still supply it, albeit it only really works with 6th and 7th gen Intel processors and AMD equivalents. So if you're now starting to see problems in getting hardware that is 3rd generation, that means XP is out. If you're starting to see supply issues, or let's say models that are using 5th, 6th or 7th gen Intel are starting to become hard to get access to, especially when hardware now is coming out with 9th, 10th, even 11th gen Intel, this is the point where you've got to start planning for it. Okay, so even though your systems may be working, if you do have a problem, if you do have a fault, yes, that hardware itself can be replaced and we can give you all reports, but if the software doesn't work backwards, this is where you've really got to start looking at staying up to date and start planning your upgrades to make sure that you're not at risk of lengthy delays. So that's our answer for industry, and it's probably time to start closing it off. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this. At Advantech, we'd love to know your thoughts. So by all means, post your comments below. We've got the links to 4.0, the ICR 3232, and the current presentations in the description. If anybody out there has any questions for Bela Farbas at 4.0, you can contact him by tagging him in the comments below or engaging through 4.0's contact page in the comments. I'd like to thank you, Bela, once again for joining us today. It's been really, really good having you here. And thanks for joining us. This is all we have at this time, and keep an eye out for our next update.